Another one of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's ministers has resigned. Treasury Board President Jane Philpott joins former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould and Trudeau's Principal Secretary Gerry Butts on the sidelines. Joining me now to discuss all things political is Brian Lilley, an award-winning political journalist in Toronto. Brian, is this the start of a mutiny? I hear the PM wants to bring things under control by demanding the remaining 33 ministers put out public statements supporting the Prime Minister.
Yeah, you could call it mutiny on the Rideau with Jane Philpott's resignation, joining Jody Wilson-Raybould. But how does this make things look better when the Prime Minister demands that you put out a statement defending him? He's had ministers fanning out across TV and radio stations all across the country saying, "Oh, he's a great man. Oh, it's a great government. Fully support him." They look like Catholic cardinals lining up to kiss the ring of the Pope, or maybe more appropriately, there, Hal, they look like mafiosa lining up to kiss the ring of the dawn. This is not a good look for the PM. I don't think that it puts the fire out. People are going to continue to speculate that MPs or cabinet ministers will resign. Look, MP Selina Cesar-Chavannes, she is from just outside Toronto. She said about a week ago that she wasn't going to run again. And at first, oh no, it's not about this. Well, now she's putting out tweets that make it clear it's about this. Nathaniel Erskine Smith, who is close to downtown Toronto. He's the beaches area in Toronto. He's saying, I may not run again. It depends how this turns out. He's making it clear he's not happy about how this is working. Another backbench MP, Wayne Long from New Brunswick, is saying that he agrees with Jane Philpott that sometimes it costs you on principle, but there's a bigger cost if you don't act on your principle. So, this attempt by the PM to shut this thing down hasn't worked so far. I don't think it will work.
Canada's top civil servant is now facing calls to resign after being called partisan at his recent committee hearings. Tell me more about that.
Well, we talked about this a while ago, about Michael Wernick's bizarre appearance where he showed up and he talked about, I'm worried about the potential for political assassination. I'm worried about where my country is going. All these things that had nothing to do with the SNC-Lavalin scandal, with the allegation that the top officials inside the government, including himself, Michael Wernick, had put inappropriate pressure on the Attorney General to throw the investigation, to throw the criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin on bribery and fraud charges. And then he tried to say that it wasn't unlawful pressure or undue pressure. Well, one of Michael Wernick's roles for the next election as the head of the non-partisan public service, right? He's not supposed to have a political bone in his body and how he operates. One of his roles is to oversee claims of fake news in the election, to oversee certain parts of enforcing the election law. And both New Democrats and Conservatives are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, you're defending this government like you're a minister. You're singing the praises of ministers as if you're part of the team. I mean, his full-throated defense of Carolyn Bennett as the best Minister of Indigenous Services he'd ever seen. My jaw hit the floor when I heard him say that. This is someone who was at the top of the what we used to call Indian and Northern Affairs during the Harper years. And I never heard him say anything positive about some very capable ministers on that file, including the late Jim Prentice, that cleared away a lot of land claims that had just been languishing for years beforehand. So there are now calls for Michael Wernick to step down. I have to say that I agree with them.
So what are the latest poll telling us about the SNC-Lavalin affair and how it's impacting the Liberals? Do Canadians believe former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould, or are they more siding with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau?
Well, the latest poll that I've seen, and there's going to be more. Trust me, there's going to be more, and not a single one has been favorable to the government, either in terms of voter intention or who they believe. Ipsos is a little bit below Angus Reid in terms of believing Jody Wilson-Raybould over Justin Trudeau, but it's still 2-1, 67% versus 32%. And so this is, you're just looking at this and saying, Gerry Butts testifying, what's he going to do? Is he going to change anybody's mind? People are already siding with the former Justice Minister against Justin Trudeau. And in terms of the popular vote, it's hurting the Liberals. It's hurting them big time. Ipsos has the Conservatives at 40% support nationally, in 68% in Alberta, over 50% in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. In Ontario, it's 40% conservative, 31% liberal, almost mirroring the national results. But I'll tell you something. How everyone across the country has heard of the mythical 905 region that surrounds Toronto. You used to live in it. It's the ultimate swing area in the biggest political prize in the country. 20-point lead, according to Ipsos, in the 905 region. Now, margins are small, the margin of error is larger, but a 20-point lead for the Conservatives over the Liberals in one of the biggest, most vote-rich areas of the country. This is damaging Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. And one last data point from that Ipsos poll, because I can geek out. I can really geek out on data points from polls. When it comes to where women sit, and people have been talking about, are women being turned off by how Justin Trudeau has treated two top female cabinet ministers? 37% say they would vote for Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives. It's only 28% say they would vote for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. The Conservatives have an 8-point advantage. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are the ones picking up the support that Justin Trudeau's losing. And an awful lot of Liberals, here's my prediction, if this doesn't go away soon, they're just going to stay home next election. They won't go to the NDP or the Conservatives. They just won't show up for Justin Trudeau.
And a poll we put on our social media sites and our website asking if Canadians feel that PM should resign, so far 77% have said yes here in Alberta.
Well, even a lot of Liberals are now saying, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's not an insignificant number that say, yeah, the PM should resign until this is cleared away. An awful lot of Liberals saying, 73% of Liberals saying that the RCMP should be called in. And about 84% of Canadians say the RCMP needs to be called in to investigate. So the Liberal spin on this has been, this is a complex issue, Hal. Canadians can't possibly understand it. Oh, this is going to go away. No, Canadians are getting this, and they're not happy with what they're seeing.
Brian, our Prime Minister was heckled recently at a climate rally, and he canceled public appointments. What's this really telling Canadians?
Well, it's the hecklers, by the way, were not upset at what's been going on with Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. The Prime Minister was at a climate change rally because what he wanted to do on Monday of this week was he wanted to change the channel. And someone in his brain trust had the mistaken idea that holding a bunch of events about the carbon tax and about climate change would make Canadians, oh, there's a scandal with the government. What? I didn't hear about that. Let's talk about the carbon tax. And so we had Mark Garneau in Toronto. We had Catherine McKenna in Ottawa with climate change announcements. And he was holding a rally and he was going to meet this family to talk about how good the carbon tax is for you and your family and your budget. He had to cancel the meeting with the family, which was a photo op only. He canceled his events in Regina on Tuesday, which again were about climate change. At this climate rally on Monday night, he was heckled by anti-pipeline and far-left environmental protesters. It did not look good on him. He looked rattled. He left this rally, and if you haven't been to a Justin Trudeau event, the guy gets mobbed on the way in. He gets mobbed on the way out. My colleague, Joe Warmington, showed me video of Trudeau leaving. He walked out by himself. There was nobody there to cheer him on. There was nobody, hey, Justin, we love you. That's unusual, especially in Liberal heartland in Toronto. So, even that, the Liberals had trouble filling a venue that seats less than 1,000 people in the heart of Toronto. It wasn't out in the suburbs. The Danforth Music Hall, it's on the subway line. It's easy to get to. Couldn't get 1,000 people out.
At his recent climate rally, Trudeau said his economic plan is working, but Brian, the latest data from Stats Canada says otherwise.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there watching the PM's rally, as I'm sure you were, Hal, and he's talking. He's making all these statements. Again, as I said, he wanted to change the channel to climate change, but he talked about a few other things. And he said, our economic plan is working. And he can point to some data points that, including number of people lifted out of poverty and things like that. And he did. Except that just last Friday, what would have been major headline news had it not been for the fact that we're dealing with this huge scandal, Stats Canada said the economy barely grew, 0.1% growth. We are getting close to recession stage in terms of the economy, and it didn't even make headlines. So this is a government that has trouble on many fronts. You're not hearing about some of these other stories because of the size and the scope of this scandal, but the economy is slowing down. Compare that to the United States, where it's still going above expectations. And you have to wonder if some of that has to do with things like Bill C-69, which has been huge in Alberta, in which the Ford government here in Ontario has done a full court press on. Quebec, if they haven't already, they're about to come out against it. I know that Premier Notley flew all the way from Edmonton to appear before the Senate committee herself to denounce this bill. So there is a coalition of provinces across the political spectrum saying this bill's bad. It's going to kill off mining, oil and gas, forestry. It's going to hurt our economy in major ways. Prime Minister seems clueless to this and clueless to the fact that the economy is not doing as well as he would like us to believe.
Brian, China is upping the ante in its fight with the Trudeau government by blocking a major Canadian canola producer from exporting to China. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is part of an ongoing fight. And I've talked to former Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz about this several times. He was Stephen Harper's longtime agriculture minister under the conservative government. China has not adapted canola. They're still using the old rapeseed oil, which is harsher, but they like to promote their own producers. And we moved away from rapeseed a long time ago because of those very same reasons. It doesn't taste as good. There's a bitterness to it. We developed canola. Canadian linoleic acid oil. We developed that, and it's fantastic. Best cooking oil going, as far as I'm concerned, along with olive oil. But China is constantly trying to push back. This latest one is being seen as a bit of retaliation, a bit related to the Huawei issue, because of course, we just had this confirmed, a Canadian court saying that Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of Huawei, an extradition process against her can proceed. So China has detained two Canadians. They've increased the penalty for drug smuggling on another one from 15 years to the death penalty. Okay, that didn't work. What are we going to do next? Let's block their agricultural shipments. In the past, they've just tried to slow things down. Now they're blocking one of the largest exporters to China. This is an attempt to hit Canada economically where it hurts. And unfortunately, it's going to hit out your way in the prairies, more particularly Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but a little bit in Alberta as well.
Brian, many farmers and producers across Canada are asking who this new agriculture minister is. It appears as though Marie-Claude Bibeau is kind of an unknown commodity.
Yeah, she tried to sell herself when she was appointed. I thought it was a bit of an odd appointment to agriculture minister. She doesn't have a background in agriculture. She replaces Lawrence MacAulay as ag minister. And, you know, when Lawrence MacAulay hosted his counterpart from the United States, whose name just slipped my mind there, they're both farmers. And MacAulay hosted him at his farm in Prince Edward Island. Now, does MacAulay have a big farm? Well, not by Alberta standards, not by prairie standards at all, but he's got a farm. And that was his line of work before he went into politics. Marie-Claude Bibeau said, well, I come from a dairy region of Quebec. She comes from the Eastern Township. She comes from an area that borders Vermont, Stansted, Derby line, most famous for the fact that the town library for both the Quebec side and the Vermont side cuts through town. And there's actually black tape. I've been there. There's black tape throughout the library telling you if you're in Canada or the US, depending on where you're standing. But she doesn't have there's dairy farmers there. I've driven past them. She doesn't have a background in it. And an awful lot of industry players are saying, we don't know who this is. We don't know who we're dealing with. We're a little bit concerned. I guess their only hopeful sign is we're less than a year away from an election, and maybe she can't do that much damage. But whereas Lawrence MacAulay, they felt they had someone who at least understood them, maybe depending on who it was, they would disagree. They don't really think that Marie-Claude Bibeau actually understands their issues, which is someone that's covered the ag file for 15 years, not full time, but I've covered it. It can be complex. It's a combination of business and agriculture issues that are unique to that sector. And this minister has a lot of time or a lot of need to come up to speed. I don't know that she has enough time to come up to speed before we're into election mode.
Award-winning journalist Brian Lilley joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.